Yeah,
or was
yeah.
it just original?
Um, no, I retweeted. It's going to be on X, but I retweeted YouTube and Rumble as well.
Okay,
Is that what you mean?
yeah, I think so. I was just looking for it to see if it was at the top of your page. Oh, there it is. Okay, yeah, I'll do that now.
Yep, we're live now. So,
Okay.
hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of Inlay Terms. I'm your host Payman Ascari. We have my good friend Ramandid here with us. Ramandid, how are you doing?
Good. Getting there.
So it's good to have you back. This is a post-election episode, but I did want to bring you back to talk to you about the election. Well, elections in general, and I was figuring like we have to start somewhere. So why don't we start somewhere basic? You've been doing most of your research on elections BC, correct?
How did it get you? There we go. Yeah.
You
No,
still there?
sorry. Yeah, tilted my phone and it cut you out. Yeah, the majority of the stuff we've been covering was the.
You still there? I can hear your kids in the background. I can't hear you. Can you hear me? I don't know if you can type if you're on the phone. It's strange. I just saw you muted and unmuted. So I take it you understand that something's wrong, but you can't. I can't hear you. I swear I can hear your kids. Are you connected to some like speaker that it's in
Oh,
your kids?
there we go.
Okay, you're back.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's
Um,
okay. So I guess just to
yeah,
repeat the question, you deal mostly with BC elections?
yeah. So we tracked most of the election stuff in the BC election. That was because it was prolonged and actually transparent. Um, and I'm sure people might just may disagree with that, but um, yeah, in the sense where they allowed the public to see what was going on, like the actual count as it was kind of coming up, because you could actually see the ballot boxes, what the election coverage was, and then they separated it with initial and final count. So you kind of had you had more time to actually make note and transcribe how the results were being tallied. Whereas like the
You still there? We lost you, Remanded. I can hear something.
Did it cut you out again? Are you there?
Okay, I got you
Oh,
now.
it keeps doing it. Keeps doing it. Um,
You were
yeah.
saying,
So
as opposed to, I think you were going to say federal elections.
yeah, I suppose like the federal elections where it was just preliminary validation and then a recount if it was there. So
Well, why don't we
just less
let's take this?
access, I guess.
Let's take this from the top. Elections BC. It's a department of the provincial government, correct?
I mean, they're both unanimous electoral bodies, so they're the legislator, I guess, appoints. If I have it right, the legislative branch for the BC election, they appoint the CEO, and then the CEO, which is the chief electoral officer, is the top dog. Um, Almost no oversight to anyone except for the legislative um, assembly. Sorry, not branch. The legislative assembly. So they hold a lot of power. And one of the things that we saw through um, Bill, I think it was Bill C, was it six? I can't remember the bill. There's been too many. I think it's like 63, where they basically brought in all of um, the regulation changes, basically historic regulation changes, so that they could actually make the electronic system that they implemented work. So, yeah, I mean, if you weren't for paper ballots and you wanted to change it, I mean, that's definitely a spot you want to be in. You definitely, having a majority government and having the person that you kind of pick to be the head of your elections. I mean, I don't think anybody really like thinks about that. I mean, that's pretty. I mean, you're hoping that electoral body is actually unanimous and neutral.
That's kind of where I was going with that. So I didn't know that what do you call it? It reports to the legislature, the legislative assembly, which is in our system, it's kind of the government anyway. In a majority government, the legislative assembly and the government are very similar.
Yeah.
But like, what's the level of civilian involvement in elections, BC?
They have. I mean, they do have an advisory committee, which is made up of. I Man, it's been a while since I've read it, but I think there's like 5 to 7 MLAs that sit on the board of this advisory, I believe, and then basically, um, basically they basically get to ask
Oh, lost you again.
from.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah, I gotta switch. Sorry, I got the wrong.
While you do that, I'm going to give
Let's-
a shout out to Prairie. Hey, Prairie, how's it going? Show comments on stage beta. What does that mean? Live comments from viewers will appear on the screen during your stream.
Can you hear me now? Is that good?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Yeah. So the advisor, I mean, they basically they can ask questions. They can ask the CEO questions, and then the CEO can basically decide whether or not to take their advisory under advisement. If you actually read some of the, they meet yearly, and so it's from what I noticed. One of the questions of last year was because we're in Canadian election and political interference. One of the questions was, does the board or do the political parties get to know what the interference was, or regarding the election, or anything? And he was basically, well, we don't we're not really going to tell you anything because we've created this interagency with CSIS and the RCMP, and we've got it covered. So it's kind of an odd. Everything just seems to be circular without actual um, public oversight, and that's kind of the same thing for the federal elections, where when you read I'm not sure which committee it was, but I think the last one I read was in, I think, 2021, where they could basically they don't have to let the public know everything that's going on, and it has to surpass a certain threshold in order for them to deem that the public needs to be aware. That's kind of like paraphrasing the questions through, I think it was the Senate, some of the senators that sat on this committee. And it was just like, wow, I mean, that's telling.
Oh, by the way, Remanded, at some point I'm going to ask you, like what would be a good solution out of this? How should it work in a perfect world? You can always just answer it in that way as we go through.
Yeah.
So like, I guess we could start right now. Like, what do you think would be a good way to do this? Would it all share absolutely everything about the election system with the voters?
I mean, that's kind of, I guess maybe a follow up to that would be what's worse, letting the public know what's going on, 100% transparency, or not, and being worried that people won't trust our elections. Like what's worse, you let everybody know they're not going to trust the election. You don't let everybody know they think it's fraudulent and rigged, and they don't trust elections. I mean, either way, you still don't, you can't escape it. So I think to some degree it'd be better to have the transparency. Like we don't need to know every instance where a pen or paper, a pen or pencil was used on a ballot, and someone's worried that it might be fraudulent. But like something, the outright clarity about, I don't know, maybe the boxes being taken home, or how many people were actually penalized for registering illegally, but it's not a crime unless you have intent to vote. I think that should be, um, I think that should be something that's made aware, to the public, because like and I know I've mentioned this once before. When we go back to the 2019 registry for the federal elections, I mean, there it was over 100,000 people deemed to be illegally registered or placed on our national registry in lead up to the election. And so the follow-up questions that we wanted them to answer, which they never did, was how many of these people voted that were removed but then deemed to be a citizen. And you kind of get, so to kind of lay that out. This election for 2019 was September, and when we look at the report and lead up to it, I think it was between May or June, around there, they removed 112,000 people, and then only a year later, after the election is done, they reduced it by 38,000. So, I mean, it's cool they're giving that information, but at the same time, what, how did you flag them to begin with? And they said that people sent in testimony stating that they were a citizen. Well, I mean, what's the threshold for that, and how many of the remaining 74,000 were voted, and were they penalized? And so they haven't been able to actually answer the question, how many of these people were illegally registered and how many of them voted. And there's almost no way for them to really, maybe that's the thing, is that they can't actually answer it honestly, because they only had 30%, about 30% of people's information in digital copy. And they basically said that, we'll contemplate investigating it further. So I think like that's one of the biggest things, just like, how do you get those answers? Like, where's the penalty? Where's the penalty box for all these people? And one nice thing about Elections BC is that they actually put about 30 to 40 people, but over the course of 2 elections, they posted their fines, because they most of them are financial, because they illegally donated to a campaign or a candidate. And so to some degree, I mean, there's transparency there, but some of those investigations took 3 years. Like that's a
Ramandin,
long time.
I don't understand. How do so many people illegally register to vote?
I That's yeah. um, I mean, that kind of goes back in that the only. I mean, I haven't read a lot from 2003 to 2019. There's some other side quests in there with other things, but the biggest thing was in 2003 because there was like a quarter million um, voter difference just in BC by combining the registries. They had came out of that stating that they will opt in to putting in place automated registration and doing away with signature verification. So one of
Hold
the
on, hold
things
on.
that
Okay, let's go back to that.
yeah.
You said there was a quarter million discrepancy. What does that mean?
So um, when people who actually like review provincial numbers or like across Canada numbers, there's three things. I did a post on this. It's called your so it's your coverage, your currency, and the accuracy, and that's basically stating that the information that we have on registered voters is like we have 90% coverage across the country or within this province. The thoroughness or I might be getting them wrong. I mostly know just the explanation of kind of the coverage and current and accuracy. The accuracy of the registry itself is, I think, nationally 91.5, 92%. And so this is kind of the conflict. So okay, so in 2003, Elections BC and Elections Canada came together, and they're like, hey, our accuracy or our voter turnout is really low. It was in like the 70s, and so they were like, we should do a study. We should combine forces, and I think this is where the cross share information incentive got pulled out or put in place, because when Elections BC looked at their registry, they had like 2.1 million people registered. When Elections Canada did it, they got 2.57. But then when they combined their registry, it was like 2.77 to 2.8 million. So they could actually find more people if they just worked together. Kind of a odd concept. When you put two heads together, you kind of get more done. And so why they didn't move forward with a combined system is beyond me, but they increased the accuracy of the registry. And so this is one of the things that I had asked the Elections BC via email, was how long does it take you to process each registered voter? And they said 1 to 3 days. So I'm like, okay, so you actually go through and make sure that they are a citizen or eligible voter. So if that's the case, now I know there's a difference between 2019 and 2025 when they flagged, over 100,000 people. What regulations they had put in place to kind of correct all these people that were illegally registering. The problem is that they did the study 22 years ago. What's happened since then? Like how 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 is there such a discrepancy, especially with modern technology, digital ID and tracking systems, everything's kind of computerized. So this is the biggest thing, and that's why I don't really go too much into the, ballots got taken home, ballot boxes gotten taken home. That just seems to be like a thing that has just always been there, but people are just more aware of what's going on. The biggest thing that I see is the registration, and that would be the hardest thing for you or I to actually track, because we don't have the registry, we don't have the list. We can't go off and cross people off. So if you were to do something fraudulent with an election, you would do it at the registry. And then where you kind of side quest. So you start with that, and then you see, okay, what's going on in this province, and a lot of the errors seem to come out of BC in the federal election, just as it did in the provincial election. We see double voter cards, no voter cards. People that voted in previous elections weren't registered. People had already voted, you know, and then from there, you can basically come up with 30 questions as to why these things are happening, and then you kind of get a little conspiratorial because you can't actually actually
Okay, let's.
prove what's happening.
I'm going to ask you some questions, and I don't expect you to. I don't know if you can answer these. How do you get on this voter roll? I would imagine if you're born here, you have a birth certificate. If you immigrate here, well, you have your immigration papers and your citizenship. What am I missing? Maybe First Nations?
Well, I think there's a couple things. Now, I haven't deep dived the whole, and I think it's called IMROC or IRMROC, which is basically your list of the list of like immigration, and so then people get flagged and or get put on the list stating that that they're not eligible to vote, and so they use that for a cross reference to make sure that these people aren't on the registry. Um, so the other thing for like adding people would be when you're in high school, you can they have a huge program for the youth for youth to vote in high school, and they've not only at the provincial level but the federal level, they've put these programs in place. So then voting actually, high school students can actually vote as if they're actually in an election, and so it's kind of like a mock election. So then, some degree, high school students learn about civic duty and our electoral process. So then they actually get added to the list early when I think they're. I don't know if it's as early as 14, but I think it's like 16, 17. You can register early, and then when you come of age at 18, you can then vote, and you're ready to go already on the list.
Look, I get where you're going with that, but who's running this country? Like, if I was running the country, I'd look at birth certificates and immigration. Those are the two ways that you can enter into this list, and I'd add them the day they're born. Is that not how it works? Like, do you have to request to be added?
I mean, there is. I mean, they do have like a citizenship, list. Um, I'm not actually sure if like when you're a child, I would assume that the government would already know that you are a citizen, right? Because you register your kid, and you get them their they get their birth certificate, you get their passport, if you think you're going to be traveling or whatever. So you get official documents when your kids are born. So there's other ways for them to cross check to see whether or not you are indeed who you are. But I think that the biggest flaw or error would be just those that enter the country, because they don't have that lifelong tracking that myself or you or whoever else might have been born here. And that's where we kind of get into the options 1, 2, and 3 with the BC election and the federal election, where there's 47 ways to identify, and that opens up the whole thing to you know possible malfeasance, especially if they're not checking everyone, even though they say that they do, but they can't answer the question how many people illegally voted and were the penalties and fines. So if you end up going and you have like the person at the front desk, the poll station, they're not going to know whether or not you're a citizen or not. They're going to see that you have your voter card, which you may or may not have gotten unintentionally or intentionally. And so there's your one piece of ID, and you have a driver's license, with where your residence is, or you have a BC Hydro bill or a utility bill. You can show that you own a house. I mean, you don't have to be a citizen or a legal voter to own a house or reside in Canada. So, I mean, what's stopping, you from registering and voting? I think that's one of the things that the MCGA Spencer out in Ontario kind of proved, where he went to 12 different ridings and went as far as to um, how far did he go? Like he had basically he didn't sign the waiver or whatnot that you attest that you're only voting for the first time and you are who you are. And so you could see that there are loopholes in it, you know. And I mean, if you've been here for, I don't know, 8 years, but you don't have your citizenship, or if you're not legally able to vote, and then you receive a voter card based on, you paying your BC Hydro bill, or you own a home.
Let me,
Yeah.
Ramanda, let me jump in. Um, Elections BC, like, shouldn't they know, or whatever, Elections Canada, before they send out that voter roll to Payman Ascari, shouldn't they know whether Payman Ascari is eligible to vote?
They should. I mean, they should. Um, because I mean, they have. I don't have it in front of me, but they have um, these lists of who's a citizen, who's an immigrant, who's this and that, who's 16, who's 17, when you come of age. So they have that. That the problem is that when they said that, when okay, let's go with this. March 23rd, nearly a month before the election day, election night, they came out with 18.2 million people were on the registry. And then I think they put out a statement. I can't remember what the day. I think it was mid-April, stating that they sent out nearly 29 million voter cards. So, you probably had, what, 700,000 people potentially register for the election. The problem I have with that statement, that they sent out 29 million voter cards, is that we just had a general election where the BC registry is less, by a, now it's like 206,000 people. But when we look at the numbers, it's let's just say 150,000 people difference between just solely BC residents, between Elections BC and Elections Canada. So if they're saying that the total amount of people that are registered it was 29 million, and they're basically saying that these people exist, but the provincial election isn't acknowledging that they exist.
Sorry, you lost me. Who you said 18 million and then 29 million? What are those two figures?
Yes. Did I screw it up? Sorry, 28.2 million. So March 23rd, they had 28.2 million people registered, and then a couple weeks later, they said they sent out nearly 29 million. So what that's saying is that these people exist. So if Elections Canada, and I know it's hard for people to probably track numbers, so I'll round it here. If just months ago, Elections BC states we have 3.5 million registered voters, but then 3 weeks later, Elections Canada says, no, well, we have 3.7 million registered voters. And then later they state that they sent out all of these voter cards just before the election. Then Elections Canada's registry should be top dog. It should be correct. So this is one of two things that is happening, and maybe both can be right. I don't think both can be right, depending on what comes out of it. Either Elections BC is not doing their due diligence and taking Elections Canada information and finding voters to add to their registry because they're short 200,000, or our federal system, Elections Canada, has inflated their registration. And what's one of the things that's happened in the last 6 years? We've had an influx in immigration. So you start to kind of connect the dots. So it does Elections Canada, are they registering illegal voters but not correcting it like they did in 2019? Or is Elections BC not adding those registered voters, or are people selectively being chosen or removed from the registry? Because one of the things that we saw in David Eby, who's the premier of BC, for those that are not in BC, in his riding, his riding reduced by 7,300, and it seems from what data we look at, registered voters were removed. But when you compare that with the population of the boundary change, they should have retained registered voters. So like, this is the problem with the topic, is that it kind of gets confusing and it's hard to track, but it just seems like there's something's going wrong in the registry on I would say both Elections BC and Elections Canada, and how you actually get them to admit that there is or isn't. I mean, that's the test you got to kind of put them to, because you have to find someone to advocate, to ask those questions, to have that investigation, to which David Eby said we would have an independent review, but John Rustad was asking for an independent investigation, and neither of them have occurred. So it's like, back to I guess the beginning, like transparency. It's like, where's the transparency, and why are we waiting months to find out still nothing's happened? And mind you, they took like a 2-3 month vacation, but
Of course, it's hard work counting elections over one entire month.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just in that, maybe this comes down to just like civic duty and people being involved. When we look at like Germany, right? And they have like 3 people surrounding the ballot box, as a scrutineer. I would assume that they take their civic duty or elections or their electoral system very serious, because they manage to count everything within 6 to 8 hours. And they had 49 million paper ballots to count. Hard to track that a little bit more because it's in German, but there is some English translation there. But you just look at why do we need these electronic systems, or are we that complacent as a society that we're not getting involved, but we're definitely okay with complaining about it.
Okay, let's table that for a moment, both
Yeah.
the electronic system and the complacency, terminal complacency. Is there any desire on what is Elections BC's intention to shore up confidence from the public? Like, is there any intention to show on their part, to come out and say, here, there's nothing wrong. Here's how we are ensuring the integrity of the electoral process?
I mean, they had a short, Anton Bogman, who's the CEO of Elections BC. I mean, they came out and stated that, all of the discrepancies were due to error and human error and weather. And that was kind of it. John Rustad, or the BC Conservatives, when they sorry, when they had the announcement stating that they were going to file, they filed a police report, and then they didn't really get anywhere with that, or it was taking too long. They went for the judicial declaration, which is in court, of which a part of that's going to come out this month. The Elections BC, they stepped away from it, stated that we're going to pause our investigation and we're going to wait to see what the court says. Just like, wow. I mean, where's the accountability? You know, like wouldn't you just keep investigating? Like wouldn't you want to know? Like, why would you wait for a judge to make the decision? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. You know, you're basically saying, well, you know, if the judge makes a favorable decision that, you know, this judicial declaration's, you know, notwithstanding, or it's you know, it's moot, or you know, there's no basis for their claim, then Elections BC can wipe their hands of it. I mean, you don't want to see that. I mean, you would have wanted Elections BC. You would wanted the CEO to come out and be like, we're gonna follow through with this investigation, regardless what the judge says, and we're gonna make sure that you know, nothing was fraudulent, rigged, or tampered with, or bad faith actors were involved in our elections, because, you know, we're a unanimous body and we set the gold standard, that, you know, people want us to have, but they didn't do that. And so, I mean, that's kind of a red flag. And then, you know, I'll just pair that up with the media officer, media relations officer for the RCMP. They stated, you know, if you know of any fraudulent claims or issues or concerns that you have, you know, don't file a police report. Let Elections BC know. Well, I mean, that's kind of garbage, because what if Elections BC is the problem? You know, it's like when they take 40 days to reply to, you know, kind of time sensitive claims or concerns from the public. I mean, that's a long time. You know, it's not something to just walk casually down the road about. You want, I don't know, you want accountability, and you want them to act, you know, quickly. But for our perspective, it just seems like a delay, because, you know, they weren't giving us answers, you know, like total registration, total mail-in ballots, total reject counts. It's like, why couldn't you have told us that at least the registration right off, like within the first week? But to have to wait 6 months for that information to come out, you're halfway through the time ticking down that they don't have to keep any of the election material. So it's like, by the time you get anything to court, I mean, you're going to have to file something else, to a cease and desist to destroy election material. You know, it's like there's a whole ton of more hurdles for integrity that you have to jump through, of which no MLA has stepped forward to pick it up. You know, that everyone's scared, you know, to be labeled. I'm assuming, because they're not really interested in it. They're very cagey about the subject, about being called a conspiracy theorist, or someone doesn't believe in the election. And it's just like, how, like, from my perspective, you know, everybody else can go about their day, you know, because they didn't really deep dive it. But for me and like Shareware, because we've been ingrained in it, we've seen all the stuff. Like, there just seems like there's no real outlet for for transparency or integrity to come to fruition. You know, we're looking at, you know, and I've been kind of slow in getting a hold of, you know, the lawyer that that we have lined up to potentially take it. But it's like, um, just a phone call is $375. You know, it's like, who's gonna have the money? Like, this is something an MLA should just pick up and be like, yeah, we're gonna put my staff on this. They're gonna ask the questions. They're gonna file FOIAs, and if we can work in conjunction with your group, um, like we've already done all the work. I mean, that's the craziest thing. Like, we've already done all the work. There's, aside from FOIAs and maybe some internal emails or orders that were given from like the CEO and stuff like that, like, it's all done, and nobody will look at it. I've been told that an email will be forwarded, and this and that, and then I brought more stuff, another email. It's just like, hey, you guys said you would forward this. Like, where's your response?
Remanded. You're
Yeah,
saying, it's my understanding you've done hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of work.
yeah. I mean, we're easily into the probably like 800 mark,
Okay.
across the team. And this, so it's not really, it's not. Yeah, there's no financial benefit to really any of this.
No, I get that, but was this solicited? Did somebody ask you to do it, or did you do it on your own initiative, hoping that somebody would pick it up in government?
Yeah, it was my own initiative. Like, and anybody can go into it. You can go into my highlights tab, look for the elections BC fraud with a question mark, and that will, I think, be the only time that you'll actually see me use that word, because I'm very cagey to label something without definitive proof. A lot of the stuff we have is like um, circumstantial evidence, but it's the counts are off. So, sorry, anybody can look at that video and you can see I clipped it in that 8-post thread, when I was asked by the host Wog that, I should say Wogpog, because I know that first word actually gets flagged for some reason. I didn't know that it was a bad word. Um, yeah, you can see that there, and you can see my response to his question. He asked me about a DDoS, and then I was just like, it's weird. Like, there's something's going on with the website, and then the count was off, and then that's when he was just like, well, better screenshot it, and that's where I basically learned how to
You mean
screenshot things properly.
this one?
Let's see. How can I zoom in? That one's got no. Go to the hot. Are you on the hot? Oh yeah, okay, that's the highlights. Yeah, keep going down. It should have like 107,000 views.
Wowzers! It's a little bit higher than what I usually get.
Well,
There.
though, yeah, that one there. Well, this one had the trigger word fraud. As soon as people saw the word fraud, people jump on it. So that's actually the unfortunate thing, that to get things moving, to get traction, to get people to pay attention, you unfortunately have to use words that you otherwise wouldn't want to use. Some people got upset about it, but it's just like, how else do you discover what's going on, or get people to pay attention to it? But yeah, it was that one there, and yeah, it's just the 15 minutes to midnight. The 9 categories of the political parties didn't add up. It's 5,488 votes short on the total count, and yeah, that's 6 months of just trying to make sense of what we saw that night in tracking everything. And it's been an absolute burden. It's not. It has not really been fun, but the whole thing just didn't make sense. It just didn't make sense.
Did any of the political parties like even care that you did this?
I mean, okay, what's going back here? I mean, tagging people on X, I mean, political candidates or those elected, they don't respond to those. So I started doing the emails. Nobody responded to them. That's the Green Party and the BC Conservatives. I did have one independent reach out, but then he never messaged me again until the statement to vote came out. And then he wanted like everything. And I was just like, well, no, I'm going to save my big report for someone that actually wants to take it seriously. We did have, yeah, I mean, nobody for, no, I didn't hear really from anybody until Christmas Eve. I got a message from a director, but then he actually got voted out at the AGM. You know, that's a whole other thing in itself. I did get I did get somewhere with one MLA, and they made an introduction, but they basically wanted me to put my identity out there, and I was just like, I mean, they could just make a thing of it and not do anything. So they didn't, when I raised my concerns, they didn't follow up or reply. So I figured, that's probably a good call, not to give them more information, because, you got to have a leap of faith. If you're actually following my posts or my work or whatever, I mean, the screenshots and references are all there. Like it's all there for everybody to see. It's not. I mean, nothing is baseless. I haven't made a baseless claim in any of the posts over the 6 months regarding elections BC. So if they actually cared about it, excuse me, why wouldn't they at least take 5 minutes? And so that was actually when, I think it might have been the beginning of April, when I published the report for 1 week and sent it to sent it to 92 MLAs. And the only, I think 27, I got 27 to 35 automated responses. One person replied saying it was too, sorry, that it was too long, and that they're too busy and they don't have, no MLA would have time to read it, but they appreciate the work. I'm just like,
Do
I
they?
just told,
Do they?
yeah, I just told you we spent over 500-600 hours, and you appreciate it, but you're not going to have an assistant or a staff worker look into it. And so then I sent them the short version and the audio version. It's just like, you could listen to this on your way back from home, on the ferry ride, or on your plane or your helicopter, whatever you take from Victoria to get back home. Like I went more than I probably had to, just to have someone review it. But I guess they're not concerned about anything, even in the short version, which doesn't really cover the whole bit, but it should be enough for you to like raise your eyebrows and ask a question. But that's just the craziest thing. And there's been a lot of ups and downs. If I don't see this through, then I've basically written off 6 months. Sorry, I just got something in my throat. Yeah, sorry, just basically written off 6 months, of our time. For what? Because like maybe I don't want to, put my name out there, put, maybe wife's job at risk, single income family, hoping that I can crowdfund the thousands of dollars that would need to put into it. I didn't expect that. I figured that we would get the report, we'd give it to John Rustad, and they would just take it and go with it. And it's just nothing. Like nothing. Like it's just so.
It's something I've come to realize as well in the last couple of years. I assume that, if you show leadership and initiative, you can inspire other people, but it sometimes doesn't pan out that way.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't really want to say it like maybe I was naive to think. My level of awareness has definitely gone up in understanding
I
how the system
I don't
works.
think you should be demoralized. Like what you've done, it has value. Like you said, you've learned the electoral process. So somebody like me would rely on you. I know I'm not paying you, but I'd rely on you as a subject matter expert. The question is like, can we somehow take what you've learned and use it somewhere to for progress?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, we definitely have I guess, the work group. Alberta, in some degree, who of which one of the person in our group is from Alberta, working on everything over there. There are people taking lead to make sure they get the tabulation or the tabulators out of their system, which they did, I think, with Bill 20 to remove tabulators from Alberta elections, including the municipal. And then they put forth the additional legislation for the electoral system. So there's good change there. The problem is you would need. I mean, we have an NDP government. They would have to be willing to take it on, put it up for a bill, and be willing to vote on it. Which, um, I mean that's just not going to happen because I mean David Eby was the Attorney General for all the regulations in lead up to this election. So why would they change anything? They think the status quo, nothing's wrong, and so yeah, I'm not even. You kind of got to get that first win. When we took it for, I mean, for those that are, I guess this is a good segue. I mean, there is a good, not a good there. I mean, there is the riding under Hunveer Randhawa out of Surrey Guildford. He does have his judicial declaration to invalidate his riding's results due to that one lodge area where groups of ballots were brought to the home, and some people didn't speak English, and they were just told where to mark the X, and that's coming up this month. There's some litigation, and I found out last week that the BC NDP are looking to seal or censor the litigation of that court hearing. I think it's on the 26th.
What's the
So
argument they're giving for sealing it?
uh, the public shouldn't. I guess the public shouldn't know. I mean, it's been hard for me to get details out of that, other than someone um, letting me know kind of what's happening. But the BC Conservatives' stance is, well, the public has a right to know, at bare minimum. And so there might be a redacted portion or certain things that might just end up becoming redacted out of that. Um, but I mean, yeah, I mean that's crazy. And they wouldn't let any new information or evidence be uh, inserted into his court case as well. So I told him, it's just like, go to page 175 to 178 in the report, and there's the stuff on the Argyll Lodge with Anton Bogman being a witness that contradicts the statements that he made. And so, I mean, that's just crazy. Um, yeah, it's just crazy. Like when you step back from it, you just like, I always kind of coined the term, we keep going. And sometimes it's just like at the bottom of the post, it's just like, we keep going and kind of give people hope that, something will come out of it. But I have had some people that are just like, what's going on with the legal side of things, and just like, I mean, I'm with my three kids during the week, Monday to Friday, and then I'm away on the weekends. So there's only so much time that you can put towards these things, right?
Remanded. Just in, we're almost about to wrap up the show. What about solutions? Like, how do we? I mean, if you had a magic wand, like, what would you change in the BC elections, BC?
I would. I mean, I'd revert back to ballots. I mean, especially if they're not going to keep the tabulator data. Like if they're not going to keep the tabulator digital data, then then right there, that's a full stop. You know, you got to be able to use that stuff, and that's one of the compelling arguments as to why an MLA or someone should pick this up. You know, how do they not keep the times? How do they not keep the information that's like the timestamp of when that ballot was put into that tabulator? You got all that information, which tabulator, which day, you know, the time, you know, what happened what with it. Was there an error? Was any information manually put in? I mean, that's actually embedded in the Dominion software for integrity, but they don't use it. Like an MLA, even a lawyer should hear that and be like, I want that case because that's ridiculous. Yeah, it is ridiculous not keeping the data for any independent investigation to find the errors of an election. Full stop. Yeah, I mean, we should go back to paper ballots. Go back to sane, um, you know, identification. You know, we don't need 3 options. We don't need 47 ways to identify. It should be harder to be put on the registration. It shouldn't be something that's easy. It shouldn't be, you know, 50 ways or whatever for that poll worker to sift through to deem that this information in the paper that they've received is correct. I mean, that do away with the vote anywhere in BC. That's nuts. That's just nuts. You're complicating the system.
Remanded. Have you ever tried? Do you have a passport?
Yeah.
Have you ever tried to get one? Like if you lose your passport and you have to get it again, have you tried that?
I've never lost it.
The
Yeah.
process, maybe even just for renewing your passport, you need to get 2 people to vouch for you. You have to fill out a whole bunch of paperwork. Like it takes a long time.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I've gone through the process. Went through the process with my kids, myself. I think I've done it 2 or 3 times. Yeah, like it's not like I've been in those lineups for an hour and a half, and the person in front of me, I remember the person in front of me, he had moved. The person that signed was in Alberta. It was like in order for him to redo a signature. Yeah. Hold on, bud. Oh, in order for them to redo the signature that I guess was an error, was like a 13-hour drive, you know. And so he's standing there and he's just like, you know, where if we're going to be that strict on the citizen passport side of things, then why wouldn't we have the same thing when it comes to electing government?
Yeah.
It just seems crazy to me. You know, we have the vouching laws. You know, this is one thing. If everybody wants to find something out, go to the Elections Act and find page, Control F, and put in repealed and start reading everything that was repealed back in 2018, 2014. I think it was 2014, but most of them in 2018 in lead up to this election where they relaxed the vouching rules. Get rid of that. You know, like they opened it up to from your household to the neighboring district. They can vouch for you can vouch for anybody. And then like it's just those things. It's like they're just making it too easy, and then there's no checks and balances, it seems, to some degree for the public to find out about. I just yeah.
So I guess the solution would be make it harder to, not harder, but a higher barrier to get on voter rolls.
I mean, yeah, I mean just the threshold. You know, it's just, you know, it's I because then how do you keep that like gold standard? What? Because you put a bunch of like safety rails, you know, around it, hoping that, you know, nothing's going to break through, nothing's going to happen. I mean, I don't know. And I just think it confuses it and makes it harder, and it makes it harder for the election workers. You know, and ultimately the public's not going to trust it. So if you're actually moving away from being transparent, I think you're actually doing yourself an injustice when you call it a free and fair election.
All right, Remanded. I guess the only thing remaining is how do people learn more about you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm solely on X at the Remanded. I did have Substack, but it takes so long, and a Facebook account, but getting that followership up across social media platforms is it's quite a task. So X I've kind of stuck with, and it seems to reach the most people. So
All right. Well, I'm sorry that you've done so much work and you're not really getting the recognition you deserve, or at least the legislators aren't taking you seriously enough. But hopefully that will change at some point. I mean, hope is not a strategy, but what else do we have at this point?
yeah, I mean, if anybody, if anybody's interested in like some of the stuff I talk about, go look up BC election coverage on CTV, CBC, I think mostly CTV, Global News, and look at when it turns 8 o'clock, the polls close, and the first 15 to 30 minutes. I have some clips on my X account, and just watch them increase the ballot box accounts. Of which never get registered on the BC elections website. Or look at the news feed, October 28th, scroll down to the bottom and look at that preliminary voter turnout number, that percentage. Like so maybe this here would be one thing. August 28th, news section, the bottom of that page, preliminary voter turnout is 2,107,152, and they gave an incorrect percentage, 58.3. Throughout the entire election, they kept the voter turnout through every refresh, through every update, every day of the election. It was within 2 decimal spaces. So that means within 50 votes, the voter turnout percentage was that accurate, within 40 to 50 registered voters. That final preliminary voter turnout on October 28th, when they certified the election, was off by 5,037 registered voters. And then when they brought the statement of vote out on April 17th, it didn't reflect that. So that's, yeah. I mean, if an MLA is listening to that, they should be taking that and running with it. Like, look, originally yeah. I'll go on
Well,
forever.
let's hope that somebody in the audience is an MLA, but no promises.
That's so
Um,
good.
well, Ramanda, thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate you volunteering an hour of your time. I know you have kids. Um, and I don't know. I wish you the best of luck. If I run into any MLAs in the bar or something, I'll try to get an incriminating picture of them and I'll force them to take you seriously.
Thank you. Thanks for your time as well.
No worries. You take care of yourself.
Later.